Love to welcome everybody to Juniper Level Botanic Gardens for our Gardening Unplugged. Today we're going to talk just about garden design and what is garden design, what constitutes garden design. Let's walk in here. Let's actually get on some grass, get in a little bit of shade. So the question is, what encompasses garden design and what does that mean? It means something different to everybody that has a garden. Typically, if you go back 50, 70 years, garden design was, I put 8 little green meatballs across the front of my house to block all the ugly stuff I stored underneath it, called foundation plantings. We don't have foundations anymore. It's not like people used to have. They were open. That's where you stored all your lawn mowers and your firewood and everything else, and it was pretty ugly, and you needed to hide it. Well, it's been hard to break people of that. People still do the same thing. When they buy a house, when you actually finance a house, you have to have little green meatballs across the front of your house and usually 1 to 2 trees in your house. That's not garden design. What we try to do is get people to think of garden design exactly the same way you would if you were landscaping inside your house. The same components apply. You need walls, you need a ceiling, you need a floor, you need furniture, large and small, and then you need decorations. It's exactly the same. As we try to tell people, if you were inside your house and you had no walls, would you be comfortable in your house? And the answer would be no. Because when you're in the bathroom, you don't want everybody looking at you. You like to have walls and doors. If you're in the kitchen, you don't want to be seeing people in the bedroom. It would not make you comfortable. Yet in gardens, most people can open their front doors and see everything they own on their property. In the front door, and then go open the back door and you see everything. There's no creating of space. So what we've tried to do with this garden is show people how you can create outdoor garden rooms. They don't have to all be the same. Just create a space. So we start with what's the walls? The walls would be hedges, would be fences, anything to give you a sense of enclosure in the garden. The floor is obviously mulch, it's lawn, it's ground covers, any options. Ceilings are your trees, especially your large trees, to give you an overall canopy. That's what encloses the space. Now you do want sun garden in some areas, so maybe the whole area doesn't have an opening. And then below that are your small trees. Big difference between big trees and small trees. If you just have all large trees, then it's very open. It doesn't feel like a place you want to spend time in. So look at the sizes. Once you get those done, your walls, your ceiling, and your floor, then look at furniture. Start with the large furniture, and I always like to start with the evergreen furniture first, whereas some furniture drops all its leaves. So you got the bases still there, and those are great, but start with your evergreens. Place those first. When I'm placing everything in the garden and designing where I want my garden space, I can't draw, so I use survey flags. You get different colors. I've got like 12 colors of flags. I got blue flags, red flags, yellow flags, orange flags, and I will go out and I will flag out an area and think about how that area feels when I walk through it. Does it make sense? Does it logistically give me an area? And then I will flag plants. I will use for large trees, I will use one color flag. For large evergreens, I will use a different color flag. And I always will flag out on the outside the mature size of the plant. When you're doing garden design, understanding mature size is enormous. Because it's so easy to plant a tree like this and not realize that that tree has a 30-foot spread. So that everything you plant out here might be in sun today, but in 2 or 3 years it's going to be in shade. So gardens are all about understanding the right sizes of plants, and that's why botanic gardens exist. Botanic gardens are the places you can go and see, oh, that's going to get that big. Oh, not what the label says.
That's true.
Got to talk about labels, because labels in box stores, which is where most plants are sold today, if you've got a tree or a shrub, look at the size it tells you on the tag and multiply it by 4. And I'm not exaggerating. If it says 4 by 4 at maturity, it's probably going to be 16 by 16. They're that far off. And if you don't, you're going to be out there with hedge clippers the rest of your life. We don't use hedge clippers on trees and shrubs anywhere in this garden. Everything is planted on mature size. That is absolutely critical. So when you're planting a conifer like this in the back, this fir, that's going to be right now, all right, so that's what, 25 feet tall and about a 15-foot spread. So when you plant, when you design, you need to realize that, all right, I can plant something under here. Generally you want to do with something cheap because you know it's going to be killed out in a few years. But understand also that gardens are always about transitions. I think that's a lot of things people don't understand about garden design, especially people who aren't plant people. They think a garden is something you install and then you're finished. That's not the way gardens work. My favorite story, when we bought our house next door, built a house next door, I kept cutting the cable lines because these people will bury it less than an inch. And after about the 5th time I cut them, they were getting tired, I was getting tired. And I said, look, let me speak with your boss. I don't know why you people can't bury it more than a foot deep. So the boss comes out and he listens, he says, well, I've got a solution. You just call me when you're finished and we'll come bury it. Yep, here's your sign. People do not get it. It is constantly a transition. Now, ideally, you won't have to move too many plants, but think about the fact that it's an ongoing activity from the time you start till the time you expire or sell your house. So let's get back to focusing on, we talked about the trees, the shrubs, the larger shrubs as opposed to smaller shrubs. The final piece are your decorations. Those are your perennials. If you use annuals, those are your annuals. Those are the things you plug in. Those are the container plants. It's all about, once you establish those ceiling, floor, wall, furniture, and decorations, then it's about colors, textures, and forms. What do you do with colors, texture, and form? You got the option. You can contrast colors, textures, and forms. You can color echo. You can echo colors, textures, and forms. You can do combinations of all 3 of those. All right, so we know what colors are. Everybody knows what colors are. That's the place that most people start out. It's all about colors. That's sort of gardening 101. When you graduate from gardening 101 to gardening 201, you start thinking about textures and forms. Some people never get that far. Some people, it's all about color because they don't have that ability to think what the bigger picture is. Plants are colorful, other than green, for a fairly short period of time, most plants. So textures and forms. Textures, we talked about the other day in a class. You have fine textures, you have medium textures, and you have coarse textures. How do you use those in the garden? The more you contrast from fine textures to coarse textures, the more your eye is going to be drawn to that. The same with forms. If you want to stop your eye, put a big, bold form there. Where there's something like an elephant ear, a hosta, that's what draws your eye. If you've ever studied how they design grocery stores, fascinating. They pull your eye to the product based on the form, the texture, where it's located. We do the same thing here. We will pull your eye as we walk down a path. We have certain plants. We know your eye is going to go to those, then it's going to go to the next one, then it's going to go to the next one. We'll often have people come through and say, well, I didn't see so-and-so. Well, you walked right past it. We didn't because we pulled your eye away from it. So we're constantly moving things around in the garden to move your eye. And that's something a lot of people don't think about. So let's just walk a little bit today and talk about some of the textures, forms, and colors that we have. You can see how we've established the upper layer. Now, most people don't look up. And it's a combination for us of evergreens and deciduous. Because in the wintertime, the garden completely changes. Obviously, these drop their needles. And it's very different underneath. So underneath a deciduous tree, you can grow an entirely different range of plants. You grow plants, especially that are called spring ephemerals. Those are plants that get in their entire life cycle before summertime. So they come up because this is in full sun in the winter, well, sort of full sun. and all those plants come up and grow, and those are deciduous. Those plants are not going to grow under evergreen shade because it never becomes full sun. Then you also have to realize that evergreen plants drop needles too. A lot of people don't realize that. I get calls every single year. My blankety blanket is dropping a bunch of yellow leaves now. Yes, that's what it does. It just doesn't drop them all at one time. Whereas deciduous trees drop them all at once. You know where it's dropping them. But it's amazing how some people won't notice all of a sudden 1 year. It's like, wow, what happened? So you've got two different maintenance regimens when you have evergreen trees as opposed to deciduous trees. All right, let's just take a walk. Textures. Look at the aspidistra, bold texture, mahogany in front, fine texture. Using those two, that's what's really going to stop your eye, those combinations. Now, typically, if you read landscape design books, they all talk about designing. You want 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s, you want big masses. Because we're about maximizing diversity, I landscape in drifts of 1. It's much easier to do larger drifts. Much, much, much easier. It's much more difficult where you got to think about every single plant you put and how it plays off the plant beside it in terms of size, in terms of texture, in terms of form, and in terms of color. Things are always changing in the garden. We like that because I want things that are always, something's happening. The garden is dynamic. I don't want a garden that looks the same all the time. I know we're in a time where everybody wants a Stepford garden. It looks perfect all the time. We have people come in the nursery. I want a plant that looks great all the time. Really? Do you look great all the time? Look in a mirror. What kind of bizarre standard is that? To me, it's about the dynamics of the garden. It's about change. I love change. I love seeing things come into bloom. I love the anticipation of the garden. I don't want, but we have plants in here that won't come up until mid to late June. You will not see them. That to me is wonderful because there's always a reason to go back out. It's very easy to garden in North Carolina in spring. Any idiot can do spring. That takes no gardening ability. To do summer, fall, and winter, that takes a knowledge of plants. And that's why we open up the gardens 4 times a year. It's really critical in my world to see the garden in the worst seasons. How does the garden look in the summertime? How does it look in winter? That's when the garden is bare. You can't hide anything in the winter. You're seeing the bones of the garden in the wintertime. Now, we're actually under right now evergreen shade. This is the most difficult to grow anything under. So to allow us to do that, we raise the canopy. And we do that by buying a really long pole saw. And I'm not talking about that cheap crap from the box stores. I'm talking about a real pole saw that'll easily get 25 feet that you can, anybody can work. And what you have to realize is every set of limbs stops light. The more sets of limbs you have, the more light you've stopped. So in terms of light conditions, you've got full sun, which means 6 or more hours a day. You got part sun, which means full sun for less than 6 hours a day. You got light shade, which means you can see some sunlight underneath there on the ground. And then you've got shade, which means you never see any light penetrating. Deep shade or shade is the most difficult to grow anything under. You are the most limited under that. You're limited to things like cast iron plants, which are known for growing in dark houses. Really incredible. Some of the ferns will still grow in there. But to limb that up, to allow that canopy, so we've actually got 4 evergreen trees. We've got this giant holly, we got this false cypress, we've got the Ketelaria over here, and then we've got a Alaska cedar here. We've had to limb those up to the point, and we do it until we get the light rays. And once we do that, we know we're growing maximum number of plants we can grow in a woodland garden. But watch as we go, because there's another path there. You really can see through there, but you can't see the plants in there. So we've done that intentionally by creating pathways. Pathways are like extending the garden without having to buy more land. Pathways are amazing. But you do that by creating. So here we've created a barrier. We got a camellia, we got a palm, we got a hydrangea there, we got a cuba here. So we're using those evergreens to create a barrier, not so that you won't see anything, but you want to go then over into that next area. And again, we talk about how things change. Look at the ground cover over here in full bloom now. What we call strawberry begonia, Saxifraga stolonifera, a fabulous ground cover. If you were out here 4 weeks ago or 4 weeks from now, you will not notice that because it's not in flower. It fades into the background. That's the beauty of diversity. There's always something incredible happening. And when that comes into bloom, that's a pretty incredible moment. So we want to be able to walk you through shade, sun. And so there's not people come out, well, what's your sun garden? What's your shade garden? Well, this one's sort of mixed. It's some of both. And I mentioned garden is always changing. We lost a large evergreen tree here a couple years ago, so we've established a new one here. So things will have to look bad for a few years. There are ways to deal with that. There are plants that grow really fast. Things like cast iron plants are great. If you ever lose trees in a storm, plant some cast iron plants. By the time you get back in the house, this already got pretty good size. They're annuals, so they're not going to be there the next year unless you replant them, but you might have to plant them for 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden your trees have reestablished. Or you have the option to convert that area into a sun garden.
Tony, cast iron
Yes.
plants are annuals?
I can come back.
No, not cast iron plants. Sorry, sorry, castor bean plants.
Oh.
My fault. Sorry.
Okay, gotcha.
Been doing this too long. Sorry. Castor beans are annuals, not cast iron.
That's one word or two?
Castor bean, 2 words. If you remember years ago where they had to evacuate the U.S. Post Office because somebody sent them ricin, that's castor beans. So you can become a terrorist immediately by growing castor beans. I would not encourage you to do so. They are really cool garden plants, but we don't need people sending ricin around. But that is where it's from. Again, if you haven't been here in the wintertime, you can really see that we have those evergreen elements that look good. A lot of people think shade gardens in the wintertime are all dead, and they really aren't. There's so many incredible things, where the evergreen ferns, the carex, the sedges you see here, the evergreen ferns, the acubas, the aspidistras, there's so much evergreen. Now, in the spring and summer, you really don't notice those because there are other plants that draw your eye. There's so many interesting things out here that you don't pay attention to the evergreens, which is why I prefer to do the most of my garden design in the middle of winter, because that's when I can see what the garden is really composed of. If your garden looks good in winter, it's going to look fabulous the other 3 seasons. If your garden looks good in spring, it may only look good in spring. One of the great evergreen shrubs that people thoroughly misuse is right back here. That is a boxwood. Boxwoods are woodland plants. Boxwoods hate growing in full sun. And the only thing they hate worse than growing in full sun is growing in full sun and getting pruned, which is why 80% of the calls to the extension office is about boxwoods dying. So great evergreen plants in the shade, but put it where they don't need pruning. And that's the cool thing about plants like boxwoods. They've been selected so long. You got dwarf ones that mature out at this tall. You've got them the tall, upright. You got spreading ones. You got every shape and size, and yet people insist on going in and clipping the darn things. It's fascinating. So here we're walking through a combination of evergreen and deciduous again. Just look at the little amounts of light coming through, just enough. And you can change a garden so fast. When you see plants declining in your garden, go out and look. And if you can limb those up within a couple of months, things will start coming back. It's amazing how quick you can revitalize the garden. Or you see how the other path, you can see the folks over there, but it's not a full view of that garden. You still want to walk over there and see what's there. So we're transitioning here into an area obviously with more sun. We still have the ceiling around, but we have an opening in the ceilings. Think of this as sort of a dome stadium that we have open. So we still have things here to make it feel like a garden room. And yet it's a very different feeling garden room than what we had in the front. Here we've got the water, but you can't actually see the water. So it's a wonderful way to draw you throughout the gardens. Hide it, but don't hide the sound. Create things that want to bring in, whether it's fragrance, whether it's sound, anything that can draw you into the gardens. But really to create, that's a whole different room over there than what you see here. So I hope what I'm trying to do is just get you to think and take home ideas. Love to steal ideas, not plants, ideas. Steal lots of them. We wanted to make this space, I was always fascinated when I would go out to California or Arizona at the gardens, and so I wanted to create that feel, and we simply do that by choosing the plants and how those plants are put together. The thing I also love about design is the use of height in the garden. And I see people as general gardeners do a very poor job of using height. Height is an amazing thing. This was a flat tobacco field when it was purchased. So by moving dirt around, we didn't bring any dirt on the property, we just moved it from one area to other. All of these beds now that are berms are simply where dirt was moved. So what does that do? That changes the way that you view the garden. You see plants from a very different angle. It also allows you to plant many more plants without having to buy more land. I was not a great math major, but I did learn in geometry, a squared, b squared, c squared. You have a lot more room when you go up than you do when you garden flat. So don't ever tell anybody you're out of room if you still garden flat. They'll know that you flunked geometry. So it's really amazing and let's just walk through a little more, what you can do by raising the beds up. And at the same time, digging beds down. So all the stream that you hear was all done by digging down. So don't ever rule out anything just because you haven't seen a neighbor do it. So look at textures here. Using the fern here with very fine texture. This is actually fine texture as well, but a bold form. So it's that game of colors, textures, and forms. So everything I do when I'm out, I have my little viewfinder. and I will sit here and I will focus and always start with 2 plant combinations. How does this look? And then I'll back out and I'll do a 3 plant combination. Then I'll back out a little further and do a 4 plant combination. Again, some people can do it on paper or on CAD. I can't do that. I have to actually sit out and look. And how does that look? Do these textures, do these forms, do these colors work together? But I said with color, here we pull the yellow color through the aucuba, through the yellow-leafed hydrangea, and into the yellow-leaf coreopsis. So we use themes to pull through. Again, colors, textures, and forms. Without repeating plants, we do echo those to draw your eye through. Now this is a very dark area we're walking under. We've got an evergreen loquat, a couple of false cypress, but we've limbed them up. Again, normally you would have no light underneath these to allow the light to allow us to grow things underneath. We've talked about using furniture in the garden. We also can use plants as sculpture, something we haven't talked about. And a classic example would be this weeping Chinese hackberry over here. That is the most beautiful piece of sculpture we have in the garden, and yet it's a living sculpture. Nursery people, as a general rule, hate plants that don't grow straight up. As a designer, I love plants that do all sorts of gnarly things and twisted branches and weeping branches. Those are incredible architectural features. So I always look for plants like that. You have to get them at specialty places because, again, most nursery people come from a farming background. Straight rows. They hate stuff like that. J.C. Ralston used to give out all these contorted plants, and the nursery people, after 2 years, they'd plow them all up because they couldn't get them to grow straight. So that's true story. That's why they're hard. But always think about how that works with allowing a centerpiece sculpture and then to draw your eye or to take a path that takes you right by that. I think I've probably gone on way too long, so I will stop here. Do we have any questions? I hope at least it gives you some ideas as to what's possible, because so often I think as garden design, we look at what do our neighbors do and we want to copy that. And with the advent of just horrible things like HOAs, which to me stifles every bit of creativity that people have, and it gives you Stepford Gardens. We would like for people to go in the opposite direction, and hopefully there will be eventually a kickback for people that don't want to control everybody else's lives. You know, I would be pretty miserable. I couldn't exist in a HOA. They would have run me out of town. Any questions? One question, yes.
Tony, do you remember how many loads of soil did Mount Michelle take?
How many loads of soil did this mountain take? I don't know specifically this one, but down below where we have the greenhouses where you will exit, we had 600 dump truck loads we had to move to flatten that out for greenhouses. So all that went around this house. And so this was really done. We had a bulldozer guy, and I just said, pile it as high as you can without turning your dozer over. And then once he got finished, I just came out and let it settle. I came out with a square point shovel and just carved the path. So it's actually, there's nothing fancy about this. Now the waterfall on the other side was a little more complicated. That was, we had to get engineering drawings done for that, but that's 172 bags of concrete from Lowe's. So I love the idea of water in the garden. Water just brings wildlife into the garden, and their gardens are all about wildlife, whether it's plants, insects. We prefer the deer not come in. But as a general rule, most wildlife, with only a few exceptions, is good for biodiversity.
How old are some of these bigger specimen trees here?
Every plant has a label on it. So if you look at the label, down below the QR code is the date it was planted.
Okay. Oh, neat. Okay.
So this particular fern was put in 2004. So there should be a tag on this. This will probably pan around
98.
I was going to say 98 or 99.
Okay.
So I think that is important for people, and that's why we put the dates on them, because you need to have an idea of how fast that thing grew. Because yeah, everybody gives you 5-year sizes or 10-year sizes. Well, you know, the plants don't really stop after that size. Most of them don't. That's fine for perennials, not so good for trees and shrubs. Any other? Yes.
I want to say thank you. And if we have questions about particular plants in the greenhouses, are there people there?
Yes. Yeah, we have very good staff in the greenhouses that can answer your gardening questions. Just ask for some of our plant experts up there. Yeah, we got, yes.
When you initially started these raised areas,
Yes.
how much extra watering did you have to do, especially in summers when things were first getting started? Because I would assume it needs more water because it's raised.
Okay, the question is, did the raised areas need more water, and how did that work? Raised areas actually don't need more water. Now, if you have something very narrow, yes, but once you have the bulk here, there's no extra watering needed at all. Now, this whole area is transition. So when we initially did this, there was no rocks here. It was just a straight slope with 2 paths. And about 3 years ago, I needed more area for woodland plants, small woodland plants. So we had our staff come in and build all the rock work. We took every perennial out, left the trees, and made this. So we created more microhabitats. I love rock gardens. Just rocks are just an amazing design element. Again, part of the architecture of the property. So all of those were brought in, but there's really no extra moisture required. But you're creating so many neat habitats. Like on the far side, heat falls off the slope. It just rolls right off the slope. So we're able to grow things that need perfect drainage. One of the great plants we've always tried to grow is Ben Franklin's tree, Franklinia, that was discovered in Georgia in the 1700s, extinct within a few years after it was discovered. Can't be grown here flat because it's very susceptible to fungal diseases in summertime. But here on the steep slope, it grows absolutely fine. The spruce, if you walk around on the other side, you'll see is a North Carolina red spruce. It only grows above 5,000 feet elevation, nowhere else. But up here on our little mountain, 330 feet elevation, it grows just fine because it's planted on a slope. So there are many plants you can grow by creating these microhabitats, and that's what's really cool about that within the grander garden design is you can really focus on small areas. And if you have small gardens, you can do the same thing. You can get so much more in an area like this by using smaller sized plants with some larger specimens to provide the ceiling. Great question. Does that answer your question? It's a long answer. Yeah, any other questions? Yes.
Have you always been passionate about plants? So did you find this passion like while you were doing something else?
Have always been passionate about plants? Yes. I was making and selling dish gardens and terrariums when I was 5 years old. And I started buying my first plants mail order when I was 5. So yes, I have a very quirky combination of genes. So, and I'm not a people person, I'm a plant person. So yes, I would spend, kids would be together playing on the playground. I'm out in the woods looking at plants. So it's really interesting because you're very ostracized as a young child. Everybody everybody makes fun of you. That's the plant guy, you know, he's crazy. And then as you age, everybody else's perspective changes. Oh, look, that's pretty cool. So, yeah, it's you know, when you have those genetics and you're very ADD and OCD as well, there's a lot of things you can't do. And so we're all given gifts, and we sometimes call them curses, but we're all given gifts. And I think the key is to encourage people to follow those gifts. Don't try to fight them. You know, I was told very early on I had two choices, doctor or lawyer, because they made lots of money and my parents wanted me to support them when they got old. I was like, sorry, the genes just didn't work out. It's just not happening. You know, you got a plant guy. No, do we make as much money? Hell no. But how cool is this? That it's pretty neat. Other questions? All right, thank you all for coming today. Enjoy the garden. I'm here all day, so please don't hesitate to ask questions. Thank you.